Good afternoon. Great to see you all in these troubling moments. So, thanks for joining. I am Hannah Morris, J Street's Director of Government Affairs, and we are here for J Street's Policy Center briefing. What's next after the U.S. strike on Iran? Uh, we're going to have a lot to discuss today. I want to frame a little bit, and then I'll be introducing our speakers. Um, where are we right now? On Sunday morning Iran time, as you all are aware, the U.S. used bunker busters and did a series of strikes on Fordow, Natanz, and Ifshan, various nuclear sites in Iran. The extent of the damage is still very unclear, and the efficacy of these strikes are continuing to be assessed. Iran's supreme leader, who is in hiding and very clearly not communicating for a reason, has yet to release any kind of statement. But the commander of Iran's military, Major General Mousavi, said that the U.S. Attack will not go unanswered. Meanwhile, today, Israel has broadened its set of targets and has targeted the headquarters of Basij, a volunteer force under the umbrella of the IRGC. It has, struck the entrance of Evin Prison, the notorious facility for holding political prisoners. It has also struck the access routes to Fordow. Really, right now, there doesn't seem to be an end game in sight. The US and UK have told their citizens in Qatar to shelter in place, and European ministers are pressing for de-escalation and a return to the negotiating table. So we will have a Q&A as part of this discussion. I will start with a few questions for our speakers, and I would like to introduce them now. And just so you are all aware, we will have a recording of this conversation later today on our YouTube channel. So first, I would like to introduce Danny Citrinowicz. He is a fellow at the Atlantic Council and at the Institute for National Security Studies at Tel Aviv University, and he previously served as the head of the Iran branch in the Israel Defense Intelligence Services. I'd also like to introduce Frank Lowenstein, who is the former U.S. Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. He previously served as a senior advisor to the Secretary of State and the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, and he's now a Policy Center Fellow. So there's a lot to get into here. I want to start actually with you, Frank, for a big picture moment, and then we'll go to Danny. What do you read as the end game for the Israeli government versus the Trump administration? And do you see their goals as being aligned? Do you think there are any ulterior motives in terms of regime change? Um, how aligned is the Trump administration or is Trump with Bibi at this time?
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. That's a really good question. It's great to be here. I think the Trump administration's goal is to end this war as soon as possible at this stage, assuming that the battle damage assessment on Fordow and Isfahan and Natanz bears out what they said publicly yesterday, which is that they had been more or less destroyed. I think if there's work left to be done there that the Israelis aren't able to do, I could see us getting back. But that does not seem to be the way that this is headed. And I think you then default to Trump's original objective in all of this, which is to further his narrative as a peacemaker and as a deal maker. So I think what he's going to want to do now is to claim that he took advantage of the military success in order to negotiate a diplomatic solution that he gets full credit for. I think the challenge there is that I'm not sure what there's really left to negotiate in terms of the Iranian nuclear program. They've already shown that they would prefer to have their facilities destroyed and their country attacked for weeks on end rather than give up what they seem to think of as their right to enrich uranium. So I don't think there's any deal to be made on the nuclear front any longer. And I think that in terms of a ceasefire, Trump would like to do that sooner rather than later. So it's really down to the Israelis then, and that gets really, I think, to the heart of your question, Hannah, which is, are they interested in regime change? If they are, you could be looking at a campaign that lasts for weeks, if not months. If they're just looking to disable entirely the nuclear program, and then I think to some extent go after the ballistic missiles to the best of their ability. And then I think you could see this winding down inside of a week. I think history has shown that the Israelis will not enter into a ceasefire unless and until Netanyahu believes his military objectives have been achieved, right? And so I think it depends on what he views as military objectives. I don't think they're going to want to do a campaign of weeks or months to try for regime change there. I don't think inside of Israel that they can sustain that for very long, given such an uncertain objective and without any sort of immediate threat involved. So yeah, my guess is that they'll disable and diminish the regime as much as they can, but not go after the oil refineries and the sort of big long-term economic targets that might create difficulties for the regime over time. That's a long-winded answer, but I think the long and short of it is I think we'll probably see this war wind down from the Israeli end within the next week or so. And that, Trump will probably try to get up and say, I negotiated a deal, but in reality, it'll just be because the Israelis are done.
And thank you, Frank. That's helpful. I'm curious, Danny, if you agree with Frank about the alignment and divergence between the Trump administration and Netanyahu's government.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Hannah, for inviting me. I'll say a couple of things about that. First, we have to remember that why Israel went to this war. Again, what we know that Israel said regarding its goals, lifting or eliminating the nuclear threat on Israel, and minimizing as much as possible the missile threat on the state of Israel. Now, before I'll touch the issue regarding I'm not calling it regime change, I'm calling it regime instability because there is no one that can replace, I think, the Islamic Republic of Iran. But Netanyahu really wants to weaken the current regime. I think that we have to say that in terms of the nuclear issue, yes, we have many successes, decapitating the scientists, everything related to the towns at Fordo, definitely after the strike of the US forces, and everything that happened in Isfahan and Karaj, all those places, definitely we hit hard on what we call the fluid cycle of Iran. But we have to remember that we don't know where the 400 kilos for 60% are enriched. And given the fact that we didn't have an understanding where the centrifuges are, even before the attack itself, one could find ourselves in a situation where Iran has the ability to enrich 90%. Not even talking about weaponization, because theoretically they also can have it. But I think that 90%, this is something that alarming. So by doing so, Israel, by trying to limit the Iranian nuclear threat, we can find ourselves in, let's say, a worse position than we started the war itself, despite all of the operational achievements of the state of Israel. So we have to be very careful in assessing what's going on right now, because we don't know how this war will end. And despite those achievements, I think that, again, without the EIA on the ground, we don't know where the material is. And so there's a lot of knowns or unknowns in terms of where we are standing around regarding the nuclear side. Regarding the missiles, again, we have major successes in pushing the Iranian back towards the eastern part of Iran, but it's Iran. They still have capabilities to launch missiles, and we could find ourselves in the war of attrition. And that's, I think, the worst scenario in terms of what Israel is expected. Now, in terms of regime change, it's obviously that I don't know if Netanyahu wanted that beforehand, but only because of the Israeli successes. But definitely for now, Israel is trying to undermine the regime. There is no one that will take over, so Israel is trying to weaken the regime in a way that it won't be any threat to the state of Israel. The real question that I asking, I think a lot of people asking, how is the US will play with that, or will align with that? There are a lot of reports that the Iranians are going to retaliate about Fordo and attacking a Lodet base in Qatar. And I don't know what will Trump will do then. I don't think he has a plan. I agree that he's interested in reaching an agreement with Iran, but the ability to reach an agreement with Iran with the current condition is non-relevant. The Iranians will not capitalize; they're not going to surrender, and we won't see agreement that will forego enrichment in Iran for now. So there is a question what will happen then. So the Israeli standpoint, we're in the junction, assuming that the US will join Israel in toppling the regime, because I think Trump is opportunist. He doesn't think ahead in terms of that. He wants an agreement, but if push comes to shove, we can find ourselves in doing something and undermining the regime of Israel. So Israel is hoping, I think, to allure that and create this kind of possibility. But if not, Israel will have to choose between two options. One, let's say the political one, agreement with Iran that Israel, of course, is against in any sort of way, unless the Iranian will capitalize and forego all of the capabilities, it won't going to happen. And the other option is stopping the war unilaterally, meaning that Israel will say, okay, I stop the war, and that's it. And I achieved my goals. The problem here is that what Israel will do if, for example, tomorrow, I'm not talking about the nuclear side, Iran rebuild its defense capabilities or its missile capabilities. And of course, we will have information about something happening in Fordo and Natanz. What we'll do then, we'll strike them and then close the Israel again because we're afraid from the Iranian missiles. So I think that we are in a stage that there's no good solution to Israel how to get out of this war. And I'll finish by saying one observation that I have. The operational preparation for Israel regarding this war were amazing in terms of the Mossad, the Air Force, and everything. It really caused severe damage to the Iranian in the first 24 hours of the war. And actually, in Israel, reached its superiority and so forth. But I think in terms of the strategic side, Israel came to this war without exit strategy. We don't know how to finish it. Like we don't know how to finish the issue with Hamas in Gaza and in Lebanon. We think only that we are able to launch, shoot, and close this issue by deterrence. And I'm not sure it will. Iran is not Hamas and it's not Hezbollah. Last but not least, I want to say something about how I think Netanyahu sees the relations with the Gulf states regarding this war. And I think is totally mistaken. I think that Netanyahu hopes that he weaken the Iranian regime, will able to do normalization with Saudi Arabia. It will that will influence Palestinians to forego their political ambitions, and of course, at the end of the day, Hamas release the hostages with no ending to the war. I think that at the end of the day, I think the Gulf states are fearing from Israel because Israel is really militarized its activity in the region. And I think they're not encouraged by that, although they love that Iran is weakened, but I'm not thinking encouraged by that. This is one aspect. And second thing, everything will happen in Iran won't save us or what's the need to deal with the Palestinian issue. We have to remember that the Palestinians are not going anywhere. And I don't see NBS doing normalization or transformation with Israel only because we weaken Iran or we destabilize the regime. And I think that now think that it's a new Middle East. I have serious doubt that we'll see a new Middle East even after the war hopefully will end. So bottom line of things, major achievements of Israel, but until the war won't end, we won't know how it ends. We cannot assume anything about the advantage or disadvantage of this campaign because we have to say Israel took a risk. Israel paying a price for this war economically in terms of definitely people that are murdered from the Israeli missiles, and of course the issue related of the influence on the Israeli morale and resilience. I'm not sure the Israeli population is resilient, but I think that the Iranians are hoping if the war won't end, it will take us to conflicts of weeks and maybe months. And I'm not sure that in current situation, it's good for the state of Israel. Actually, I'm quite sure it's very, very bad. So I don't see a way out that is positive, but it's a wait and see how things develop.
I can just pick up on that really quickly, Hannah. I think there's one a point that Danny just touched on that's important for everybody to think about, which is what is the long-term strategy to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon or even to prevent it from reconstituting its nuclear enrichment program, right? Because this was an extraordinary tactical success, right? But one of the arguments for the JCPOA and for a diplomatic resolution of it was if you took the military path, what you would do is drive Iran's program very, very deep underground. They would kick the inspectors out. They would withdraw from the NPT, and they would do everything, in as clandestine of a manner as they possibly could, and therefore at a much smaller scale. To the extent to which they want to rebuild their centrifuges in Natanz or Fordow, is Israel just going to continue to bomb them every time they go and start rebuilding their centrifuges? In other words, is this become a perpetual conflict? What happens when they start rebuilding their air defenses, which I think at some point the Russians will probably. Does Israel just take out their air defenses over and over again? So are we in effect a perpetual state of war where Israel continues to hit Iran such that it can never constitute really even its defensive capabilities, right, which are related, of course, to its offensive capabilities? And if that is the case, I don't think the United States wants to be involved in anything like that. Over time, I think we would like to have this be a one-off and say, okay, now we've got a couple of years to figure out what a diplomatic approach would look like. But yeah, I think the Russians made some comments yesterday that I think flew a little bit under the radar. But Medvedev said, hey, Iran's not going to stop Iran from pursuing a nuclear weapon. And he said there are countries prepared to give them a nuclear weapon, right? So you have Iran now in a place where they may feel like they need a nuclear weapon for basic deterrence, and doing it through the way they were trying to do it previously, where we had real visibility into what was going on, isn't going to work. So now do they try to smuggle it in? Do they try to get it from the North Koreans or the Chinese or some, don't think this problem has gone away. And in fact, in some ways, strategically over time, it may be harder to contain than it would otherwise have been. So yeah, as tremendous as it was as a military success, and I think it really does solve the problem in the short term. I have real questions about how this is going to work over time.
So you both laid out some really helpful context here. I'd like to drill down. We've talked a lot. You've mentioned a lot of known unknowns or unknown knowns. There's the question of the long-term strategy. If I'd appreciate, Danny, if you could, and then Frank, walk through, we've heard some pro-strike folks say, like, this was the time to do it. You had Hezbollah weakened, you had the Assad regime fall, weaker proxies in Iraq, it the prior tit for tat with Iran demonstrated it's, really not that much to be feared. Like, this was the time to strike, and Israel took that and then laid it up for Trump. Can you speak about the merits of that argument versus the risks that now exist in light of Israel's operation and the United States, striking these facilities? And I'm talking about the risks both in terms of the nuclear program and geopolitically, especially for the United States, but also for Israel. Danny, if you can go first, and then Frank.
Yeah, first I want to say that I agree totally with Frank. The question is Israel intend to conduct short of war campaign in Iran? It's not Syria, and it's not Hamas. It's something different, and I think it goes along also to the question that you asked. I think yes, we had the Persian opportunity, golden moment. Hezbollah was a goner in terms of its ability to threat Israel. The 26th of October attack in 2024 destroyed Iranian air defense capabilities, the strategic one, S-300. And of course, we had the backing of President Trump. And I think that the fact that you can do something doesn't say that you need to do something. Now, Israel combined that with something that we don't know how to describe, the issue of the development of the nuclear issue in terms of weaponization. Now, for sure, something was there because we know that last year the American administration approached the Iranian, told them that the scientists are doing something. Now, I don't know whether they were closer to a bomb or not. Definitely, it wasn't that Khamenei instructed the Iranians to build a bomb, put it on a missile, and launch it to Tel Aviv. Yeah, it wasn't the case. But something happened there. So I think the combination of the Persian opportunity really pushed that forward, and the thing that happened on the nuclear side probably helped it. But it is important to say that it was a serious gamble taken by Israel. Now, everybody is in Israel in euphoria. We killed Baryari and Ghulam Rashid, and of course, Salami and Amir Khazizadeh. We revenged the fact that he was in charge of the launching of the missiles in April and in October. But we are entering a very uncharted territory in what we are doing right now, because of the fact that we can think about the IAEA inspections. They gave us assurances, especially regarding the material in Iran. We knew what really happening in Fordo and Natanz. We have no idea what happened between when Israel started the strike until yesterday. We don't know what the Iranians what they took. Nobody knows, and I think nobody maybe ever will know. And I think that this war, and this is also connected to what Frank said, I think that it might change the Iranian calculus regarding a nuclear bomb. Again, I'm connected to the scientists. I don't know what happened there, but definitely I think that no one claims, not in the Israeli IC, not the American IC, that Khamenei took a decision to build a bomb. All the scientists did is preparing for the event that he will decide to do so. This is what all the briefing coming from Israel after the attack itself. So I think that we might change the calculus. I think what the Iranians understand now, that in order to secure the regime, like after the Iran-Iraqi war, they will have to have new capabilities. And they base the capabilities on indigenous production and activity. Nobody can rule out the fact they can buy tomorrow a bomb from North Korea. And then what we'll do, for example? And then we'll bomb it in the desert and we'll say, well, nuclear state, don't get near us. And then what we'll do, I think that it's not the Iranians inspiring to have a nuclear bomb in terms of the long-standing dream. I think they wanted that first and foremost for the deterrence. And everything that happened in this war actually, in terms of their way of thinking, I am afraid that they understand that regardless how the war will end, they will have to reach nuclear capabilities. And this is something that should very alarm us. And the Israeli has amazing, in the US, have amazing intel on Iran, but we never know the 100% story of Iran. So we have to be very cautious on that. So this is a major risk that we took. The other risk that we took is the fact that we took our population and under constant attack by the Iranians, the devastating effect of the Iranian missile is something that unprecedented. We never saw that. We never endured that. We had Hamas, we had Hezbollah, but you cannot compare that to what the Iranians, to the extent that they have the ability to threat Israel. So it is not a gamble regarding the Israeli civilians, and of course the economy. I'm not talking, it goes without saying, no flies, nobody is working, and how much Israel can endure that, days, weeks, months, I'm not sure. So it's another, so you're going to a very dramatic event, and then you don't know how to close it. So this is another problem that we need to deal with and to see, because there are no easy options as described earlier. This is another risk that we took. Yes, we have major operations. We already mentioned that. But the thing that the question is also, how is it perceived? We talk about the Gulf states. I think it's a problem. And I think there is a problem with the euphoria that's happening in Israel. That we really think, look, I think that Netanyahu really think that this regime is, we're able to topple it because of the bad relations between the regime and the population. I think that we are overstretching. I think despite everything that we are doing now, the regime won't be toppled. And then what? We are getting into some sort of reaching a target that we can never have the ability to reach it, even after we bomb Evin prison or the siege. It's not going to help. No one else would take it. And it's not like Israel came with a plan with opposition members in Tehran that now will take control of the, I don't know, whatever. There is no plan. There is that bombing the regime itself. But again, with the void, what will happen then? So it's another problem that we are facing. So in the end of the day, when I look at that strategically, I'm really trying to think whether Israel will come out strong from that or not that strong for that. Now, people are saying to me, of course, we have achievements. Everybody, we kill this, we do that. Excellent. But at the end of the day, we know how war starts. We don't know how war ends. And the major question is how this war will end. Now, if Trump will go with Netanyahu together at the top of the regime, maybe it was worth it. I don't know. But for now, I see a lot of problems in how the decision-making process also in Israel. We started with one or two targets, and now we're adding another one. Now we're talking about killing Khamenei. I think it will be a strategic mistake. It will transform the war to become between the Jews and the Shiites. Khamenei is also a political and a religious leader. We will come with Martyr. Everyone that replaces him will be obligated to continue his work. So I'm not sure we're thinking everything thoroughly. And when our defense minister tweeting that, I'm not sure someone is really helping them thinking the consequences of that. So we are, I think, a little bit arrogant in how we are behaving, and we have to be very cautious. Iran, yes, we show definitely operational superiority, intel superiority, but Iran is a country that endured 8 years of war with Iraq, and I think they had the resilience, and we have to be very cautious in how we are assessing the strength of the regime these days. So the bottom line of things, Israel went to war to prevent the nuclear side. I'm not sure it's hopefully, but I'm not sure it will serve its purpose. Missile-wise, we'll never have the ability to bomb all the missiles. And what will happen if tomorrow 50 Sukhoi 35 will land in Tehran airbase for gift from Russian to the use of the Iranians? What are you going to do then? We're going to bomb that also. So we have so many questions about the end mechanism that I don't think I don't see any, let's say, optimistic solution for them.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to build on that quickly.
And
Sorry.
specifically the U.S. the threats to the United States after this strike too.
Right. Yeah, I think that what we could be looking at here is just a long-term, low-intensity conflict that blows up periodically. I think it would be the Israeli approach from this point forward. So the war will never really end, right? Every time they see a target emerge there, they'll just go and attack it again. Over time, that will presumably get more difficult. But that, I think, I think that the notion that there's going to be an end to this war with Iran as sort of a permanent, I hope that's the case. I certainly think that's what Donald Trump would like to do. But I think that there's a scenario here. Look at what happened in Lebanon, right? Israel's still striking targets in Lebanon every time they see Hezbollah beginning to reconstitute any of its capabilities. And as Danny pointed out, it's a little more difficult to do that when it's 2,000 kilometers away. But I think that's the path Israel is committed to going down. And if they're not really willing to do any kind of negotiation with the Iranians, sort of complete capitulation, which Iran has shown it will not do, then I think we may be looking at a war that occurs over a long term here. And Hannah, to your very important question, I'm not sure we've seen the last shoe to drop in terms of what the Iranians are going to do to respond to the United States directly. I think when Trump recognized Jerusalem, and then when he assassinated Qasem Soleimani, I think in both of those cases we were assuming there would be some massive, protests throughout the region or Iranian strikes on our interests, perhaps our soft targets. And all they did was fire some cruise missiles at a military base where nobody was killed. And yeah, I don't think we're necessarily going to get off that easy this time. I don't think that Iran has the capabilities to really do a lot of damage, nor do I think they want to draw the U.S. further into the war. What I'm concerned about there is Iran playing a long game when it comes to revenge, right? And Pompeo keeps talking about Hezbollah sleeper cells inside of the United States. They can turn to terrorism to real asymmetric warfare here and start planning things. So we could see we've seen this in the past with Hezbollah, blow up a Jewish community center in Buenos Aires, and there are all these second order consequences that would result from Iran taking the approach that the only real weapon they have is terrorism, and then start shooting down airliners and that kind of thing. So I don't think this war is going to be as cost free for the United States and for Israel over time in terms of the Iranian response. And so again, it's all further to the notion that we could just be in an endless cycle, as we've seen in Gaza Strip, as we've seen in Lebanon, as we've seen in some of these other places where the war just kind of goes on forever. And that's the downside. Kerry and I once had a conversation with Netanyahu about he had some military approach to some problem. If you have a big enough hammer, everything sort of starts to look like a nail. And Kerry said, Bibi, you're just going to try to, kind of kill everybody. And he was like, John, we will always live by the sword. And Gary was like, well, you do understand the second part of that clause. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. And Netanyahu was like, I repeat, we will always live by the sword. So if you keep going down that path, I'm not sure really where it ends.
So we're talking about a mow the grass strategy potentially. Danny, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about your view on how much Iran's nuclear program has been, quote unquote, set back. Now, we know that they have likely moved material like, uranium enriched to 60%, enough to produce eventually 9 to 10 nuclear weapons. Can you talk about how people are assessing the number of years that it has been set back, and how do you consider calculating that, between the assassination of the 10 plus nuclear scientists, the, at least damage done to nuclear facilities, and yet at the same time moving, the Iranians being able to move out some of their enriched material?
Yeah, so definitely it's a major question because when we see why Israel went to this war, definitely the nuclear issue is on top, because Israel claimed, as you all know, that it's a preemptive strike, imminent threat to this existence, so they have to do something. So the question is, okay, what have been done in that regard? I will start by saying something about the Iranians. I think that we all in the notion of the Iranians know that they're losing. I'm not that sure. I think that Iran understand that they suffered severe damages. That's what goes without saying. We decapitated senior leadership, very close to Khamenei itself. But I think that for them, they are pounding back. They are able to cause damage to the state of Israel. So I think why it's so important, because this notion is a notion of we need to continue. We're not going to capitalize. We're not going to surrender. We're not going to surrender our capabilities. We're not going to give the US or Israel the benefit of us not building nuclear or missile capabilities. So I'm starting with that because this war didn't change nothing in the Iranian calculus regarding the need to build a strong deterrence against the state of Israel, continuing what I said previously. So definitely they will build those capabilities. And this is, when you talk about years, you have to say something. It's indigenous production, meaning that the Iranians build everything from the mining to the enrichment to 90%. They can enrich 90% tomorrow if they had, of course, if they have the equipment. So I think that we have to remember that regardless of what we did, the Iranians are able to build the enrichment site and what happened in Isfahan, the conversion line, and the Karaj, the factory for producing the centrifuges. So that's one aspect we have to remember. This is why when you're attacking a country that's so close to 90%, and has a vast and rich capabilities, you know that you cannot elapse it by using military means. I heard seniors from the American side saying that we done with the nuclear program of Iran. Well, I wish I was that sure. I'm very skeptical about that. And it goes along. So definitely we have achievements. The first time, the killing of the scientists that deal with weaponization, it's achievement because it's unique knowledge that they have. Now, I don't know how many scientists in Iran dealt with that. So I don't know how to assess whether it's 10, like we assassinated or decapitated, or 50, so we killed only one quarter. I don't know, but definitely it's something that it's achievement in terms of weaponization side. The second thing also connected to the fact that everything related to enrichment. Of course, we dramatically damaged Natanz and now in Fordo. I think those sites are able to rebuild, but it will take some time, of course. And we have the issue of Isfahan and the conversion line. It's important because the conversion line, you are actually doing what we call the metallic uranium, and it's a dual use activity that really help you promote towards weapon. So I think definitely in terms of the fuel cycle and weaponization, we severely damaged the Iranian capabilities. Now comes the but. The but comes in many terms. One is connected to the willingness of Iran, where he said that the Iranians have the willingness to preserve that. They are not going to surrender or capitalize in terms of they're not going to stop enriching on the soil, in their point of view. One aspect. The other aspect is, like you mentioned, Hannah, is the issue of the material. We don't know what the material is, and that is a major problem. Now, adding to that is the fact that we have to remember that between Israel striking on Thursday and US striking yesterday, we had almost, I think, 10 days that the Iranians could do whatever they want in Fordo. And the Iranians are anything but stupid. They knew it might come, and probably they evacuated some of the material to unknown locations. Now, if we had IEA on board, maybe we could know, but we don't have it. So we rely on our intel. Hopefully we'll know that. Same goes to Natanz. Although Natanz, we have struck it in the first strike, so and damaged severely the 14,000 centrifuges there. But I think Fordo is the thing. Adding to that is the fact that in 2021, someone tried to hit the Courage manufacturing facility, the centrifuge one, and since then, the IAEA has no control of how many centrifuges that the Iranians are manufacturing. So hypothetically speaking, even after everything that we have done, we can find ourselves in an unknown location. The Iranians have the centrifuges together with the enriched material, and they can have I don't know how many kilos for 90% for numerous atomic bombs. So until we don't know that, we're not able to assess the real achievement of Israel. But definitely, we have to take everything that we did, the important thing that we did, with a grain of salt. We have to say that. In terms of weaponization, again, theoretically speaking, if the Iranian has some sort of conversion line and metallic uranium that they already preserved, maybe they can do something. But I think it's probably a little bit longer. But I think the real threat is the 90% of the fissile material. So the bottom line of that is that we have major achievements, but we have to take everything with a grain of salt because at the end of the day, when you're attacking a country with such a knowledge in terms of enrichment, even weaponization, the ability of you to send them back is there, but it's not elapsing anything. It's not taking them to the point zero. And with the willingness of Iranians to continue that in the future, and the inability, I think, to continue this war as it is for a longer period of time, won't be surprised to see that at the end of the day, we'll have that happening. And one other aspect that I think I want to highlight, I don't think, given the relationship between Iran and Grossi, they really think that they were duped by Grossi. I don't think that the IAEA and Iran will have a good relation in the future. This is a very bad thing because we can say whatever we want about the IAEA. They deter the Iranians from taking material away, and also they allow us as someone that look at the enrichment site to better understand what's happening there and give you the advanced report that they produced every quarter. Without that, it's a loss because we lost. I know we lost a lot of things. I think we gained and lost, but I think one thing that we lost is the certainty of what's happening. We knew what's happening in Natanz Fordo. This is something I don't think it will turn back in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point, and I think everybody should be watching very carefully what we hear about the HEU that Iran had. There's been different stories. The Times is covering this, so it's easy to track. But yeah, was it at Fordow? Was it at Isfahan? Has it been moved somewhere else? It does not take a whole lot of centrifuges to enrich the amount of uranium they have from 60% to 90%. That could be done. The centrifuge is the size of a scuba tank, right? And you need several hundred of them, but you don't need several thousand of them operating over a long period of time to take it from 60 to 90. It's actually a very small step from there to there. So yeah, I think that's something that bears watching very carefully. A couple of other points to I think are worth really focusing on. The Iranian regime over time, it certainly has been weakened. All right. And I do think that what that provides is an opportunity in places like Lebanon and Syria to try to move forward with creating, I think, in Lebanon, a democracy that can really function over time. That's a lot easier to do if Hezbollah is as diminished as they are, if they're no longer getting support from Iran in the way in which they have previously. Obviously, Iran has a lot of bad actors that they've been running, militias in Iraq and in Syria. So is there an opportunity to advance efforts to create a stable government inside of Syria without Iran, doing advancing their own agenda, which is counter to everybody else's in those places. So I think on a regional basis, there's really a window of opportunity that should last at least a year or so to try to move forward in a positive way, in terms of creating this sort of situation we'd like to see sustain over time. On the other side of the coin, though, I think the IRGC, and people really need to understand this, it is the deep state in Iran, right? As it is in Turkey, as it is in Pakistan, as it is in Egypt. And when that is the case, it doesn't really matter who the supreme leader is. I mean, Netanyahu says we kill Khamenei and the war will end. That's not really borne out by the facts on the ground at all. I think the IRGC is so deeply embedded in that society economically, obviously militarily. They run youth programs. The Basiges, they're everywhere inside of Iran, and the clerics as well. So there's a much stronger, deeper rooted apparatus here of security and education and social services and whatnot than you're ever going to be able to uproot, right? So the idea there's going to be any outcome here involves so democracy. Even in Egypt, we saw that lasted a year, right? And then Morsi was kicked out, and the military took back control again. So I think we're dealing with the IRGC, over an extended period of time. I don't think there is any answer to that question. I think the real thing to watch going forward is, do they make a strategic calculation that it's no longer worth it for them to support Hezbollah, Hamas, and any of the other militias they're running in Iraq and Syria? Do they decide that keeping just putting the nuclear enrichment program off to the side altogether is in their best interest? Yeah, that's one scenario. I think that there's every bit as realistic of a scenario, which is that you get hardliners in there. They had their brothers and uncles and fathers and mentors killed, and they're like, we're going to get Israel back, even if it takes us 30 years, right? And we're going to slowly rebuild all this. We understand now what Israel's intelligence and military capabilities are better than we did before. So next time, the penetration won't be anywhere near as extreme as it was before. And so you have an angry group of Iranian, generals who are hell bent on revenge and creating, a military nuclear capability, a ballistic missile capability that's a real deterrent. So yeah, I think that in terms of where the Iranian government goes, there's every bit as likely of a scenario that this heads in a negative direction as it heads in a positive direction. But the one thing I do know is that there is a window here where they will not be mucking around in the region, and we should all take advantage of that to try to advance our objectives there.
Well, speaking of not mucking around, there's breaking news from Barak Ravid that Israeli officials are telling him Iran has launched 6 missiles toward U.S. bases in Qatar. So just want to make sure everyone is aware of that here. I want to probe a little bit more with you, Frank. A two-pronged question. One is related to what you just talked about, and one is heading in a different direction. One, you talked about the deep rootedness of the IRGC. How does your thinking about this square with what's very clear that the Israeli intelligence services have really been able to penetrate Iranian military and intelligence, IRGC apparatuses? I mean, there's clearly a weakness there in some regard. So I'd like to hear you parse that out. And then in a different direction, I'd love to hear there's been a debate over the last few days, especially post-strike, U.S. strike on Fordo, about the appropriate role of Congress in authorizing or overseeing U.S. involvement. And this is particularly, I'd love to hear your take on this, given your role on SFRC. How do you, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, how do you think Congress should be exercising its authority and responsibility at this moment? So first, the IRGC and Israeli penetration question, and then the Congress question.
Okay, I'll touch on the IRGC question first, but then I think maybe Danny might be able to shed more light on that than I. I think obviously there's people that hate the regime inside of the IRGC, inside of the Iranian military. They have effectively people that are willing to work counter to that regime, operating at very high levels. I think their signals intelligence is obviously extraordinary. But the point I think that I'm trying to stress on that front is that people adapt over time. Right. I was really surprised the Iranians were honestly as stupid as they were after they saw what happened to Hezbollah, and not to understand that they were equally penetrated as Hezbollah was. But I do think that both those organizations over time, they adapt, right? So they take on different trade craft, right? And they take a look at, who can we trust and who can we not trust? And over time, I think they take steps to reduce the Israeli. Israel spent 20 years effectively planning both of those operations. So the idea that they're going to be able to just go do that again whenever they want to, I assume that the Iranians are going to take steps to make that much more difficult over time. Again, further to the point of what's the long range strategy to deal with the program. You have fewer intel capabilities and it's further underground. How do you manage that? But on the Congress front, I'm just going to tell you my own honest opinion on this, and I know the J Street view is that there should be a vote on it. But I've been on both sides of this issue at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We had a whole bunch of hearings on the War Powers Act. Obviously, Kerry was very committed to upholding congressional prerogatives on this. It was our view that this kind of strike did not require an act of Congress. Obama did it when he wanted to go after the Syria chemical weapons in 2011. He decided to seek approval from a Congress, but at no point did he acknowledge that they were required to do it. He just felt like he wanted it. The Libya intervention was justified by a Security Council resolution. Everything else we've done in the war on terror has been under the AOMS for Iraq or Afghanistan. And so the idea that this is going to be the case in which suddenly Congress starts to have a say in whether the U.S. can do what are in effect one-off strikes, I don't think that that's, and again, I've seen it also from the administration side of it. There's no way any president is going to go for that, right? Whether it was Obama or he did it voluntarily, but Biden, no, this isn't a partisan thing. No executive wants to see the power to conduct even one-off strikes be limited by the need for prior congressional authorization. And it is a really unwieldy process. You're talking about 30 days, 60 days, votes on the floor, and you can't really run a country that way. So I think if Iran were to respond and we are getting drawn deeper into a war here where my line and Kerry's line was always, are there US soldiers getting killed? If there are, then we really need to have congressional authorization for it. If not, then it falls probably within the prerogatives of the commander in chief. So anyways, long and short of it is, I don't think we're going to see, if we see a vote on that, it'll be symbolic. I don't really see very much of a point because you'll wind up getting 70 senators saying no on it, right? And what have you really achieved then? And I don't really think that that's the way that the War Powers Act is supposed to work. So yeah, I don't think that's going anywhere. I understand. And again, I've been the one complaining about it and I've been the one ignoring the complaints from Congress about it. And I just think that's always going to happen. But the vote on that, unless we get drawn into a bigger war, it's just not likely to have an impact one way or the other.
Yeah, I hear you. I think the issue that members of Congress see is the likelihood of getting drawn into a war and wanting to ensure that there is a debate about that. I'd love, Danny, that your take on the penetration of the Israeli intelligence into the IRGC and other military apparatuses within Iran. And then heading to an audience question, can Trump leverage this attack in any way to make Bibi end the war in Gaza? I think this is an interesting question, especially as we think about what should the U.S. endgame look like? How can we move forward? I mean, both of you are pretty skeptical at the moment that Iran could agree to any nuclear agreement. So what should, if Trump were willing to listen to any of us on this call, what would you be advising right now? So Danny, the first question would be on the penetration of intelligence, and then what would you be advising Trump right now in terms of its engagement with the Israeli government and moving forward toward an end game?
I just would relate to let's talk a little bit about the Qatar event because it's an emerging story. I have to say that it definitely seemed like an El Assad attack after Soleimani's assassination. Everybody knew that was going to happen. The U.S. I think evacuated the base. The Qataris closed their airspace. So it was a play, and I don't know how the video is going to tell it because I think all the missiles were intercepted. The Iranian had to do that to signal that they're not ready to accept any attack on their soil. So again, we'll have to wait. I don't know how things will play out, but I think also every side got what he wants. But again, it depends on Trump and see how it develops there. In terms of the in terms of the penetration of the Mossad, it's obvious. It's not the first event that we see the Mossad is using Iran as a playground. I think this event is very dramatic because of the sheer volume of the activity. Actually, we have a combination of the Air Force attacking and the Mossad attacking from the ground, eliminating the senior leadership of the security apparatus of Iran, Baryari, Salami, Rashid, and together with the Air Force activity, it's actually damaged, crippled the command and control activity of Iran. But it's not the first time. We have so many examples in the past. Just in last July, Israel already admitted killing Ismail Haniyeh in IRGC guest house after he came to swearing of Pezeshkian as president. So we have that in the past. Mossad invests a lot in Iran, and definitely you can see the combination between the intel and operation activity, and that's really something that is dramatic. I'm sure that the Iranians try to understand how it happened, but I'm sure that also for the Mossad people, they will know how to bypass any obstacle that the Iranians will put in their way. But definitely, it's amazing, amazing event in terms of using the intel understanding or the intel gathering that you have to build operational capabilities that actually make a good use of that. So definitely, it's a very unique activity. Again, look, regarding Trump, I'm very skeptical about the ability to connect between Gaza and Iran. I don't see any connection in terms of, we have to remember that Iran main interest that Hamas will stay in Gaza. Hamas will stay in Gaza only if there's going to be a deal that will end the war with releasing of hostages, but will end the war. This is something that Israel is highly not interested in doing for several reasons. So there is no actually interest of Iran to pressure Hamas. Not it's going to happen regardless, but assuming theoretically that actually Hamas will give the hostages back with no ending to the war, and then we all know what will happen next. So I don't see any connection. There are people saying because Hamas will be weak or because Iran will be weak, Hamas will understand that the country that actually supports him is weak, so we have to do some compromises. He will need to do compromises, but it will demand the end of the war. So I don't think that it will change anything, unfortunately. And how do things will play out? Again, I don't know how Trump will assess what happened now. We heard a lot of threats about Israel try to hit our forces. And then what? I assess that Israel will be more than happy to see Trump getting in and trying to punish the Iranian and thus pushing the US more and more active in Iran. But it's actually meant to be seen how Trump will behave. I think still that Trump is interested in a political solution. The problem is that without saving face in terms of Iran and to give them something, no deal will happen. So I don't think, again, I'm very pessimistic in finding a way in the next couple of days or weeks to get out of this war, unless something dramatic will happen. I think that this war, there are major achievements. If I was Trump again, but I'm very subjective, I would force Israel to stop the war because it also would serve its benefit and finding a solution, build now where the Iranian capabilities are and trying to reach a solution, but give something to the Iranians. Otherwise, there won't be an agreement. Anything else, demanding them to capitulate, whatever, it will just make two things. Or the US will disengage, will say, I don't want to involve in that, leave Israel alone to deal with that. It's a one major problem to Israel. Or the other problem is that he will decide to engage. And then we can find ourselves very dominant US activity in Iran that might prevail, but might not prevail. So we'll have to see how things plays out. But like I said, for the Israeli case, there are no good solution. And as else connected to what happened yesterday in Fordo, there are no easy wins, and there are risky wars. When you attack Iran, Iran is a country that eventually has its dignity and perceives itself as a superpower, they had to retaliate to do something. They did something, I think, that was simple, but it is what it is. They have to do something, and now we'll see how Trump will take it. But escalation can be something that we have to consider, including escalation that embedded also China and Russia. We don't know how things will play out. We are in a very uncharted, very unstable ground, uncharted territory. So we have to take that into consideration also.
Frank.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Okay.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to see if you wanted to weigh in a little bit more on how you would advise Trump if there were an open ear, but I'm happy to move on to the next
Well,
question.
yeah, on that, I just don't see what you're even going to be negotiating about at this point. The Iranians are obviously not going to be, at this point, what more concessions can they make, right? And I think they view it as a matter of national pride. So I don't think Trump is going to be has any deal to make other than maybe try to get him to stop firing at each other when the Israelis were already prepared to wind down on that. I think what we also see, if there's a nexus with Gaza here, I think Netanyahu has shown he's going to do whatever he wants, and he really doesn't care what Trump says. And Trump has shown that he respects power, he respects force, he respects brutality. And so I think whatever influence we had on the Israelis in terms of at least providing food in Gaza, if not advancing towards a ceasefire, I think our leverage, if anything, has been diminished. And I think to some extent the militarists in the Israeli system who say this, again, we can kill everybody, all of our enemies, and we need to, and before threats can fester, whatever. I just think that whole mentality of war is the answer. Those voices may be strengthened, and Trump, who could theoretically have been a moderating voice on that, I think, if anything, he'll have less influence even than before, may not even try. So I hate to say it, but I don't see this auguring well for any kind of a negotiated outcome in Gaza anytime soon. I think, in fact, we may just be going the other way for a while there.
So it sounds like Iran is striking 4 U.S. bases in Kuwait, Qatar, Iraq, and Bahrain. So this is potentially getting to be much broader. Final question as we wrap up. I mean, who are the players that could influence the direction other than the United States? Like, where do you see Russia? Where do you see China? And then Saudi Arabia and other Arab partners. Is there a way that they kind of provide forcing mechanisms to end this, or is this really down to the US and what Bibi wants?
Well, I'll jump in. I think the country to watch again. I don't even understand theoretically what we're talking about negotiating here. I mean, Israel's going to attack its targets, and then when they're done, somebody can come in and say, okay, we've now negotiated a ceasefire here, right? But I don't think that ceasefire is going to hold. I think we're into a perpetual conflict with spikes and dips along the way, as we've seen in all the other conflicts Israel has. Right? They'll continue to act to defend themselves, and there's never going to be a moment where they stop doing that. And there's never going to be a moment where Iran stops doing stuff that they view as threatening, right? So I don't really think there's an end to the intensity of this current phase of the conflict. But I think when we go back and look at this, we may very well think an open war between Israel and Iran started 9 months ago, and has continued on as far as actually. What I really would keep an eye on is Russia in particular, because obviously they receive missiles and drones from Iran, right, to pursue the war in Ukraine. They've tried to do economic deals with them that will help both countries circumvent Western sanctions, right? So that there is an alignment of interest there. Also, Russia's with Syria, with no longer run by Bashar Assad, they really have a limited presence. So they really don't want to see this Iranian regime disintegrate, let alone be replaced by some kind of a Western-friendly democracy. Right. So I really wouldn't be surprised if the Russians, again, clandestinely, but just started doing what they could to bolster Iran's defenses to help Iran to be able to deter or prevent the next Israeli attack. Right. So I think that they're a potentially malign player in terms of, and the Chinese aren't going to get their hands dirty with this, but I could see them providing money. I can see them providing support behind the scenes. And then as I think Danny and I both mentioned, the North Koreans are a really scary piece of all of this because they can I don't know how you would transport it, but they have a nuclear warhead they can sell if they really needed to. So you have the Russians involved in that. Like that's the piece of this that scares me the most is that do those big players start to get in and quietly help the Iranians to develop a nuclear deterrent and quietly do what they can to help make sure that that regime survives. Because if they do, then that Iranian regime will become much stronger over time.
So Danny, on this final troubling, in these troubling moments, and I should just be very clear how, we are here with you, and I know that you're going through a lot at home with your family, so just thank you, especially Danny, for hopping on as you're navigating this in your personal capacity. Um, any final thoughts on these players that we should be watching, understanding that this may very well be a long-term war of attrition?
Well, definitely we're in a pivotal moment today, given the Iran attack. And I think the Iran attack actually symbolized the fact that the Iranians are not here to capitulate or to surrender. I don't know what the US will do now, but it's an important moment in time because USA can find itself deeply involved in Iran soon, or you can find yourself disengaging because the Iranians will probably will say we did it as a one time just to revenge what you did. So we want to stay straight only with Israel. So it's a pivotal moment in time. I don't know how things will play out, but chances of escalation are higher than ever. Once US decided to intervene directly, not only defensive but also defensive, the Iranian, if they had in mind, have no choice but to do something against that as well. The Iranian has no intention about finding themselves in a war between them and Iran and USA, but for them it's just building the deterrence. And what they did, and I'm sure they notified all of those countries. We saw the airspace be closed, but they tried to minimize the effect, but again, still creating something substantial. So the ball is in Washington hands, and we'll see what will happen because, as we know, the president is very unexpected, so we don't know how things will play out. I think that's one thing. The other thing that I have to say is that we are regarding China and Russia. It's not that they're going to help defend Iran in a way. The Iranian doesn't want the superpower help because they are proud countries. They don't want Chinese boots on the ground or Russian boots on the ground. But definitely the day after, we'll see them helping the regime itself. There is one caveat I have to say, is what if US or Israel would decide to eliminate Khamenei? Again, this is something that can cause major problems and also increase the chances. I don't think it would be a direct friction, but we'll see probably the Chinese and the Russians doing more than they're doing now. So the last thing I want to say is that we are this war can go everywhere, and but I think I see more dark clouds in the sky than ever. Maybe in Israel, we are happy that the Iranians did what they did because now we can convince the US to enter the war in a way that will support Israel more and maybe toppling the regime, maybe. But I think that we have to be very cautious. We are dealing with an enemy that we don't have to exaggerate his capabilities, but still is an enemy that is a fearsome one with resilience. So we have to be very careful. And now we're assessing how things are developing toward the future. But again, pivotal moment and everything can happen.
Well, Frank and Danny, thank you so much for taking the time today. This is, as we've all heard, there are a lot of known unknowns, and we at J Street will be here as a resource to all of you and continue the conversations with experts on the ground. And thank you all so much. Look forward to seeing you next time. Stay
Danny, I
safe.
hope your family is safe and everybody in Israel as well.
Thank you very much. Bye.